The 431st edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Good! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! Got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Gus.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services, and we're coming at you live here on a Thursday night on Halloween. Going to do a little Carolina basketball trick-or-treating, if you will, ahead of the start of the 2024-2025 basketball season, which gets underway on Monday night when Carolina hosts Elon in the Smith Center. So we're here to kind of give a season preview, if you will. We'll talk about the three biggest storylines around the team and the program, play a game of true or false, and then, as always, deliver our bold predictions for the upcoming season. Before we do that, though, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to former Carolina basketball head coach Roy Williams for that pod thought, and that thought is, quote, Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was worked on every day. And that's what Hubert Davis and his staff and this team, they've been busy working on all season long, all off season long, just continuing to build to become the best team, the best program that they can be. And look, our expectations are usually very high. In Chapel Hill, that's the case once again this year, with you returning the best player in the country in R.J. Davis. And kind of a theme we've talked about this preseason, and you've kind of seen it really come to life when you've watched the exhibition games, whether it was the Memphis exhibition or the Johnson C. Smith exhibition. Man, Carolina's head coach, Hubert Davis, has really found himself, and after some up and down success his first couple of years, he's really found his voice and he's really found his footing, and it feels like this year he feels poised to lead this program and cement this program back among the nation's elite, which is where Carolina basketball is expected to be on an annual basis.
Yeah, it just feels like there's a lot of motivation there to really get a title for one of the program's greatest of all time. And I think that's something that, drives a lot of people, but especially a guy like Hubert Davis, who helped recruit R.J. Davis to Carolina, was his assistant coach, and then eventually became his head coach. So he's been tied at the hip to him for a long, long time. And so I think that's a big part of it, is that he really wants to be able to take the next step as a head coach, yes, but he does want to bring home a title for one of the special guys on this roster. And I think, you look at the fact that he wasn't able to get Armando Bacot a title, I think that's probably driving this even a little bit more, because if he can do at least, what we saw Roy Williams do with guys like Joel Berry, Kennedy Meeks, Isaiah Hicks, the guys that weren't necessarily Bryce Johnson and Marcus Page, but it feels like, that could be a little bit of vindication. This one is a guy that was a key contributor for you. He's led this program each of the last 3 years. He's been Carolina's best player, RJ Davis has. And so I do think that that's really the driving force and why you see so much energy from him, even in the exhibitions.
Yeah, look, there's no denying, RJ is already a program legend. He put together one of the best guard seasons we've ever seen a Carolina guard have last year. And, through the uniqueness of his time at Carolina, playing through a pandemic, playing through the coaching change, being a part of two of the biggest wins in the history of the program over Duke, he cemented himself in the minds and the hearts of Carolina fans. Coming, especially from me, where this guy is a bona fide top 3 player of mine that I've got to watch in my 15 plus years watching this program. And to give him a chance to win a national championship was our challenge to this team or to this staff all offseason. Of course, we got a long way to go to find out if that's going to be true or not. But after seeing the team play, 3 times in the preseason, we would not be surprised if Carolina was the last team standing come the first Monday night in April. But with that, we'll go ahead and jump right into our 3 biggest storylines entering the year. And if you're a new listener, we welcome you. If you've listened to the pod all off season, then you kind of heard us talk about this throughout. The first big storyline is replacing Armando Bacot. You're talking about a program mainstay for the last 5 years. That felt like a decade. It still feels weird not seeing Armando in a Carolina uniform. I don't think we're fully convinced that when Carolina tips the season off, he won't be the guy at midcourt jumping the ball up like that. I still think there's a possibility that Armando just strolls on out there with a new hairstyle and a fake mustache to kind of disguise the NCAA. But he's gone after a successful, lengthy career at UNC, the most decorated rebounder, the most accomplished double-double man in the history of the program. Carolina did as much as they thought they could to try to replace him, flirted with every big man in the portal, did not get a big name, had to settle for Ben Allen Lubin from Vanderbilt, Tyjon Claude from Georgia Tech. They're banking on internal growth from Jalen Washington, an incoming freshman in James Brown who shows promise. And the biggest thing that's going to be monitored from the non-conference season on is, did Carolina do enough to replace Armando Bacot?
Yeah, it's the number one question. It's really what determines the ceiling for this team, because if they have found guys that can replace him, if they found maybe more athletic guys that can sort of stretch the floor, guys that can defend, especially out on the perimeter, then you're looking at a team that might just be better than last year when you combine all the other pieces together, and could be, the type of team that we've seen, throughout the last few years in college basketball that are able to make runs to the national championship and eventually win. Now, last year was a little bit different. Last year, you had 2 tremendous big men that just took over the sport and found a way to meet on the final Monday night. This year, I think it'll be a little bit different because you don't really have those old school type bigs. There's a couple of them still hanging around, but a lot of the guys can stretch the floor, and I feel like Carolina is going to have to be able to match that. I think what we've seen from Jalen Washington, there is reasons to be hopeful. He looks like he's a guy that's ready offensively. And I know that we spent most of our time talking about him improving on the defensive end of the floor, but I do think that there was still room to grow offensively. And he looks like a guy that's going to be able to handle himself inside. He's going to score those easy baskets, and he's going to be able to stretch the floor a little bit more than we saw from Armando Bacot. So I love everything with him in that respect. You look at Vin Allen Lubin, a guy that is able to hit the offensive glass, finishes second chance opportunities. I'm still interested to see, because he did sort of struggle in that area just a little bit against Memphis, which is, a team that's pretty good, would be, one of the better teams that Carolina faces on their schedule if you put their whole schedule out there, but still probably one of the weaker teams that's going to be in Maui. So I want to see what he's able to do against some of those physical rebounding teams that Carolina is going to face. But I mean, all the statistics would tell you that he's a guy that can really clean things up on the offensive end of the floor. And I thought in that exhibition against Johnson C. Smith, he showed that there is a little bit of offensive game that he can bring, especially against some of the weaker opponents that Carolina is going to have on their schedule. Tyjon Claude, this is the best time to break this news. About an hour ago, it was released by his agency, EZ Sports Group. He's now officially eligible. So he is going to be able to play for Carolina if they need him. Figuring out his role is going to be interesting. I think this game that Carolina is playing on Monday night against Elon will probably be where they'll now have to do that. They would have loved to be able to do it during the preseason, but I think the thought was, let's not put him out there if we don't know for sure that he's going to be eligible, because we could be putting him out there and wasting a chance to really learn what James Brown can do. I do think that one of the things that we look at, and we were kind of concerned about was the depth of this group. And I think the depth is there. The biggest concern is, what are they defensively? Can they defend inside, especially against more physical teams? We've seen it with Jalen Washington. At times he's been pushed back, went on the block, matched up against more physical defenders. I think you saw that a little bit against Memphis. So that could be something where we have to continue to see him grow as the season goes along. And to be fair, we saw that last year with Armando Bacot. Same can be said for guys like Vin Allen Lubin, Tyjon Claude, and James Brown, all guys that are, by the way, are 6'9" or smaller, which is probably the other concern for this group.
Yeah, I mean, I think the depth is definitely there now that you have Claude ready to go once the season gets underway. If this would have been something that Carolina was having to work through all non-conference season and maybe didn't get him eligible to until like late December, then I think that would have been a tricky road, because I love the upside of James Brown. I think James Brown's going to be a really good player for Carolina. I don't think that needs to be this year. I think he needs to kind of see what you kind of go through what Jalen Washington went through and what a lot of bigs go through at Carolina, just getting their body ready for the rigors of playing in the ACC on a night in, night out basis. But now that you have Claude, he's a guy that's proven it at the college level. He's experienced. I think he'll have a much more defined role. And I think that's the thing about the front court is, there's question marks there, but I think with the way that Hubert Davis rebuilt that area of his roster, the roles are going to be very identifiable, and they're going to know what their job is when they walk on the floor. And as long as they play within themselves, then I think Carolina can replace Armando Bacot in ways that will look very different to the eye than what we've seen traditionally as Carolina basketball fans. The next biggest storyline is one that is only really possible because of the season that he had a year ago, and more importantly because he's back for his super senior season, and that's the fact that R.J. Davis can set the all-time scoring record at UNC. He can pass Tyler Hansborough's scoring mark. To set the ACC mark, I think is pretty much out of reach. He would have to have arguably one of the greatest scoring seasons in the history of the sport to really threaten the all-time ACC mark. But the UNC mark is in question. If he pretty much puts up the same numbers he put up last year, he'll do it. And I think there's no reason to believe that he won't do that, considering he's the best guard in the country and the best player in the country. Mm-hmm. When Tyler Hansborough set the record, back in the 2008-2009 season against Evansville. I remember watching it live. I thought then, okay, college basketball is moving to a one-and-done era. Guys aren't staying 4 years. We're never going to see this mark get threatened. We fast forward 15 years. Yes, RJ has an extra year to do it, but now that record is in question. Did you ever think that RJ? Did you ever think that this record would be on the verge of being broken? And kind of something we had to talk about when Armando was setting, certain records at Carolina. Will it mean any less because it took RJ Davis and a fifth year to do it, as opposed to doing it in a standard 4 years?
Did I think it would ever be broken? No. Because you just think that guys that are as talented as Tyler Hansborough, they would be snatched up by the NBA. I believe to this day that if he, let's say Tyler played right now, there is zero chance that he would be in college for 4 years. It just wouldn't happen because they would see enough, especially because he ended up being a first-round pick. They would see enough from him that they would want to get him in there early and develop, because we know this is every sport now. It's all about youth. It's all about getting guys into your system and developing them young. And, it's part of why there's so many issues when it comes to every professional sports league in terms of how, guys pan out. I know that you look at Tyler Hansborough, he didn't end up panning out. But still, I do believe that there are some benefits to staying in college and being able to work on your game as much as he was able to. For RJ Davis, does that fifth year, does that extra time at Carolina, does that, kind of alter how people will look at it? Yeah. I mean, a little bit. I'm not going to lie, because you're always going to remember that it was 5 years, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that it isn't an impressive feat. And the thing is that it doesn't matter when you say who is the ACC's all-time leading scorer. You're not going to say it's RJ Davis, but you're going to say it's RJ Davis, because that is a fact. So it is still an unbelievable accomplishment. And it's made even more unbelievable because you think back to when he was brought in to Carolina. He was a guy that, clearly was not expected to be better than Armando Bacot. He was definitely not expected to be a better player than Caleb Love. And once Caleb Love had the tournament that he did in 21-22, leading that team, to a national title game appearance, I don't think anybody thought that RJ Davis was the guy that would blossom the most out of those two. You look now, RJ is so much better than Caleb. And that's not just because Caleb is on a different roster. Caleb's a hell of a player. RJ Davis is the best player in college basketball right now. And so I think it's going to be, people will always throw that in there when you have conversations about who was the greatest scorer in Carolina history. That will be part of the argument that will have to be brought up if you're laying out the case for certain guys. But it doesn't take away from the fact that this is still one of the most impressive things that you could possibly do, especially if he closes this final season averaging more points per game than he did last year, which would just continue an amazing growth throughout his entire career at Carolina.
Yeah, look, I think I have a pretty good eye for talent and understand when Carolina's got a great one.
Of course.
I didn't see this coming from RJ Davis in his freshman year. I knew that the kid played hard. I knew the kid was tough. Never would have thought we'd be talking about him the way that we've talked about him. Mm-hmm. And it's a testament to his work ethic and really his commitment to excellence as a Tar Heel and understanding, like Armando Bacot was. He's now the perfect example of what Hubert Davis wants in a Carolina basketball player. This is a guy with 2 feet in. He's committed to the program. He's committed to the university, and just loves being a Tar Heel and lives that every single day of his life. And we're just lucky enough to get to watch him play basketball. Hopefully we can do that about 40 something times this year, and hopefully he has the type of super senior season that helps him, set records and take home many award come March. So the last real storyline before we get to true, false, and bold predictions for the upcoming year is this roster better equipped to play deeper into the NCAA tournament than it was a year ago? Carolina won 29 games, an ACC regular season title, played in an ACC tournament final, was a 1 seed in the tournament, but ultimately bowed out in the Sweet 16 to an Alabama team that, mind you, made the Final Four and gave UConn their toughest test in their NCAA tournament title defense. Like, that game was close at the under 8 mark or so in the second half before UConn would ultimately pull away. A lot of the guys from last year are back. Davis, Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, Jalen Washington, just to name a few. You're adding K. Tyson, Venal and Lubin, to the front court, and you're adding dynamic freshmen in Ian Jackson and Drake Powell to the roster as well. So, I think last year, I know in the preseason I picked Carolina to go to the Final Four, and everything they did in the regular season would have suggested they were a Final Four team. It wasn't the case. 2 guys in your backcourt were bona fide unplayable in the second half of your season-ending loss. When you look at this roster right now, is it better equipped to advance further than the Sweet 16 where this program was a year ago?
Oh, I think so. I've told you that I think right now on paper this roster is an Elite Eight roster. I just think that you are seeing the biggest thing to me that stands out is the depth. I think that is way ahead of last year and any other time that Carolina has under Hubert Davis has put together a roster. There's so many different guys that can affect the game, especially that backcourt. I also think that this is a roster that's built more like what Hubert Davis was envisioning his roster would look like. And I think that was part of the challenge that he had to deal with over the last few years, was making the transition from the way that Roy built rosters to the way that he wants to build rosters. I was saying this to Joel Berry, who we recorded with earlier today. You guys will hear that one coming up later on in the week. I was texting back and forth with him. We were talking a little bit about Venal and Lubin and everything like that. And I told him, like, one of the things that I've thought about, especially since the Johnson C. Smith exhibition, is just how many different lineups you can throw. I think you've got a lineup where, with the lineup that we think probably is the best 5 for Carolina right now, where you have Davis, Cadeau, Trimble, Tyson, and Jalen Washington. Relatively small group that Carolina's throwing out there. You also can probably get to the point where you could play Davis, Cadeau, or Trimble, either one, Cade Tyson at the 3, and then Venal and Lubin at the 4, and Jalen Washington at the 5. There's also so many other guys. You could take out Venal and Lubin in that situation I just laid out, throw in Jalen Withers. Drake Powell could be on the 4. There's so many different combinations that you can throw out there. That doesn't even bring into the equation a guy like Ian Jackson. So that's the thing that I think is so much different about this roster, is it's deeper. You've got a legitimate, I think, second scoring threat alongside of RJ Davis and Seth Trimble that we didn't necessarily know if we were going to have heading into this offseason. So I think there's a lot of things that are starting to come together for Carolina that makes me believe this roster is better than last year's roster.
Yeah, this is the deepest, the most versatile Carolina's been in quite some time. And I think you need to have that in March, because March is all about matchups, and you got to be able to play different styles and win different ways. This is going to be a team built to win games in the 80s, but they can also, they got to be able to do that in different ways. It can't just always be hitting 12 threes a night. They got to be able to score, inside out, mid range, and they've got the guys on the roster that can help them achieve all those different types of playing styles they have to play, that they'll need to play at to win the number of games we hope to win this year. Let's now get into a game of true or false. Always a fun game to play going into the season. Got a couple of questions here that we'll answer, and we'll start like this. We know that Carolina plays Kansas and Alabama in the non-conference portion of the season. And there's a chance they could play UConn in Maui. You would, if that would be the case, that would more than likely, you would imagine, be in the tournament final. So with that in mind, true or false, Carolina beats either Kansas, UConn, or Alabama. 3 teams all ranked ahead of them in the preseason AP Top 25 poll in the non-conference portion of the regular season.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think they're going to beat Alabama. I think that game at home, you're coming off of that team beating you in the tournament last year. There is going to be a lot of emotion in that game. And I get it, man. You can make the argument that Alabama's better than last year. They did an amazing job of going out, paying the NIL money they needed to build a roster that they think can take the next step. But that's going to be probably the second best environment of the season outside of the game against Duke. And that's really saying something, because you've got some great conference games and you've also got NC State in there. But I do believe there will be some sort of theme that night, more than likely. That could be the whiteout game, whatever. They will do something, because that game is going to mean a lot for these guys. I don't see any way that Carolina is going to lose that game. Kansas, second game of the year. They might still be ironing some things out. I think the fact that you were able to play on national television, you were able to go on the road to face Memphis in front of a crowd will help. But that is a lot to ask them to go into Fog Allen Fieldhouse and come away with a victory. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. I'm not bold enough to pick that right here. But I do think that Alabama would be the one that they get. And I got to be honest, if they get UConn in Maui, I think they can win that game too, because that's when you're going to want to get UConn, is early in the year. I'm more afraid of UConn when you come around tournament time, because this is a team that's just going to be so used to making deep runs. There are enough guys that come back from last year. Plus, you still got Danny Hurley that just knows how to coach during that time of the year. So I think if Carolina gets them in Maui, there's a chance they could win that game.
Yeah, I think the answer is true. And I think you would be disappointed if Carolina did not get at least one of those types of wins in the non-conference season. Like if Carolina loses to Kansas, loses to Bama, and let's say they play UConn in the Maui final and they get beat, I don't know if it'd be similar to where we were last year when Carolina lost big games to UConn and Kentucky early on in the year. I don't know if we'd be as confident that this team could make a Final Four if they play in that many high-profile a game and don't win at least one, especially having won on your home court against a team that ended your season a year ago. All right, we'll move on to something we talked about just a minute ago. True or false, RJ Davis sets the new scoring mark for Carolina basketball this upcoming season.
Oh, I definitely think this is true. We kind of mapped it out. He would have to average 21.3 a game, which was what he averaged a year ago. I think he will be able to do that. I also think Carolina is going to play deep into the ACC tournament, deep into the NCAA tournament. And so I believe that he's got more than enough time to be able to do that. He's too good of a scorer. I get it. There is some pressure that's going to be taken off of his shoulders by a guy like Seth Trimble. I do think that Jalen Washington has shown the ability to score the ball. Cade Tyson, eventually will be a threat. I think one of the better ones from beyond the arc, and Elliot Cadeau shooting the ball better. But we know who this offense runs through. And there will be moments where this team will need RJ Davis to carry them, and he will be more than capable of doing that. So I don't see any way that this does not become true.
Yeah, I think this answer is true. Selfishly, I want him to set the record. That's nothing against Tyler Hansborough. Tyler Hansbrough is the best college basketball player I think to ever play college basketball at UNC, but there's a different connection to RJ for me with where I am at my fandom and now as a podcast host and a writer. And look, I know there are more scoring options on this team than a year ago. Guess what? It makes the game easier for him. So you could see a scenario where he averages the same amount of points, maybe even a point or two more, and is even more efficient, which is saying something because for him to be a volume scorer, he was very efficient last year as well. So I do think, yes, whether it happens in the regular season, the ACC, or the NCAA tournament, Carolina basketball will have a new scoring holder, and that would be in the name of R.J. Davis. Something that I predicted last year that did not come to fruition, but I do think is very possible this year just with how explosive this Carolina offense is set to be. True or false, all 5 starters average double-figure scoring this season for the Heels.
Oh, man. Well, see, this is going to be the issue. If all 5 guys average double figures, I don't know if R.J. Davis scores nearly as much as he needs to. I'm going to go false on this. And I think part of that is because they are going to be using a lot of different guys throughout the year. With all that depth, I think it's going to be hard for every one of these guys to manage double figures. If I'm looking at the guys that I think probably have the best chance, I think RJ, no question. I think Seth Trimble will average double figures. And then the next guy that I'm most confident in is probably Jalen Washington. And then after that, I think with Cade Tyson, how are they going to split time between him and Jalen Withers? And with Elliot Cadeau, I just think with Cadeau, I don't think it's that he's not capable. I think if Carolina needed him to be a double-figure scorer, then he could be. I don't think they need that this season. They need him to be a guy that shares the ball at a high level, doesn't turn it over, and controls the pace of the offense. I think he's going to be able to do that. So I'm going to go false on this one, but it doesn't mean that this group is not as good as we think they can be.
I'm going to go true just because I think they'll play so many more possessions than what we're used to them playing that there'll be more scoring opportunities. I don't think people are really taking into account how fast this team is going to play. And I think there's going to be a stark difference in the way Carolina plays this year as to the way they've played the last handful of years. This is going to remind a lot of Carolina fans of the Ty Lawson days where they literally just raced up and down the court and play in the open court for 40 minutes. Because I think for them to play at their highest potential, that's the way they'll have to play. But B, they're built to play that way, and C, their head coach is demanding them to play that way. So I think if they were playing the same amount of possessions as they were last year, I think the answer would be no. I think because they're going to play an extra 5 to 10 possessions more a game on average this season opens up more scoring opportunities. I think that answer is true. A few more before we get to our bold predictions. Carolina last year swept their arch rival, the Duke Blue Devils, winning both games, one in Chapel Hill, and then, of course, the one in Durham to secure the outright ACC regular season title a year ago. The year before that, remember, Duke swept Carolina. So Carolina bounced back in a big way this year. We all know the hype around the Blue Devils. Cooper Flagg. They're the ACC's preseason pick to win the regular season. True or false, Carolina sweeps Duke for a second straight year?
Yeah, I'm not the first one that's answering this question. I'm not being the villain here. I'm going to put the pressure on you. This is your podcast. You let it be known first what you think.
I'll say the answer is false because I don't ever expect to sweep them. I expect to split with them. Because, I mean, we know how tough it is to go in their building and win, although Carolina has done it 2 of the 3 times under Hubert Davis. And on the flip side, we know how great that environment and that crowd is for Carolina when they come to our building. And this year, with it being senior night and that'll be the last time we get to see R.J. Davis play. I think it'd be a hard thing to envision Carolina losing that game. So right now, I think the answer is false. That might change after we get into the first 3 months of the year and we see these two teams play. But I'll go first, and I'll say the answer is false.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's false. But I will say that, and who knows, maybe I should have put this as one of my bold predictions. I guarantee you the game that if Carolina loses, the game they will lose will be the game in Durham. They are not losing on senior night. No, I don't care. I don't care how good that team's playing. That team is not losing on senior night in what will guarantee be R.J. Davis's last game. We thought last year's regular season home finale could be that, and that was incredibly emotional. But this one's going to be another level. There is no way that team is losing that game. So, yeah, I'll go with false because to me, there's too much talent for Duke not to get one, I would think. But I do think Carolina is going to get that one at the end of the season on senior night.
All right, true or false, Carolina repeats as ACC regular season conference champions.
I'm going to say true. I just think when you look at how brutal the ACC schedule can be, I just wonder, is Duke, as young as they are, able to survive that? Now, again, I think this is a scenario where this comes down to the final game of the season. I don't think this is going to be one that Carolina is going to put away early. I think these are clearly the two best teams. There's a good chance that both teams come into that matchup with 2 conference losses the whole year. And that really decides it. So, yeah, I mean, I like the veterans that Carolina has. I think the depth, Duke's depth is much better than it's been in years past as well. But I still think that Carolina's depth is probably a little bit better than theirs. And I think that, when it comes down to it, I think with the veterans that Carolina has, that's what ends up making a difference and allows them to get over the top.
I think the answer here is true as well. Carolina values the regular season more than they value the tournament. Mm-hmm. Although I do think if there's been a slight difference, and I guess in the messaging, when Carolina's competed in the ACC tournament, you can tell that Hubert Davis wants to win it. And part of that is because when he was playing at Carolina, even though the tournament had expanded, it was still a really big deal. Like, you went to Carolina to win ACC tournament titles in the 80s. That mindset really kind of shifted more during Roy Williams' time as Carolina's head coach. But there's no denying they value the regular season more. And also, man, their soldiers have gone through it. RJ, Elliott, Trimble, Jay Wash, Withers. They know what it takes to win an ACC regular season title. They know the rigors of doing it. And so I think there's no denying and it's more often than not, this is the case every year, Duke is more gifted. And I do think with some of the tweaks John Shire's made to the program, are they better equipped to maybe live up to the hype in the regular season more than they have in years past? Yes. I still think, though, over the course of 20 games at the ACC level, Carolina will prove to be the better team. Like yourself, I think it comes down to the final game of the regular season, and I have a hard time envisioning Carolina losing at home on RJ senior night in a situation that could lose them an ACC regular season title. Last true-false question before we get to our bold predictions. True or false, Carolina earns another number 1 seed come Selection Sunday?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. If you win the ACC regular season, especially if you only have, like I think they probably will end up having 2 conference losses, there is no way that you are not going to be a number 1 overall seed unless this narrative that the ACC is just a terrible conference continues. I think it will happen. First of all, the brand of Carolina is going to be strong enough where they will be up there. And I do think that when you got the best player in college basketball, and I think it'll be very clear, especially at that time of the year, that is the case, they are going to make Carolina a 1 seed. And at that point, again, I don't really know what more Hubert Davis could do by that point in the season to prove to people that he is the guy. There are still people that are doubting this dude as we head into this season, especially with what he's doing on the recruiting trail, whatever. This would be an amazing accomplishment, even if Carolina ends up bowing out in the Sweet 16 where they did a year ago. The fact that this guy would have won back-to-back ACC regular season titles and earned a 1 seed in consecutive years just shows you that he is building this program into exactly what we were hoping they would become post Roy Williams. Still one of the best programs in all of college basketball, and one that is going to compete with the best year in and year out. So I definitely think this one's true.
Yep, I'll go true as well. I like you believe if you win an ACC regular season title, then I think that puts you in the conversation to be a 1 seed. I think, with what the non-conference allows them to do as well, or if they can stack some big wins against some conference opponents, that's really going to strengthen their resume, maybe push them over the top in terms of quad 1 victories. So I'll go true as well. And I think, honestly, if you're a Carolina fan, it should be your expectation that come Selection Sunday, that team's on the 1 line. Also, the first and second rounds of the tournament are going to be played in the Triangle area. So, like last year, basically playing in your backyard in venues that you'll be comfortable playing in and be well supported playing in, where your fan base would be there in a large capacity. Don't think that they don't know that going into the year, and understand the importance and the significance of being able to play close to home the first and second weekend. We saw how important it was last year against Michigan State in the second round. Having that home crowd behind them helped them fuel that comeback to advance to the Sweet 16. And so I, like you, do think that come Selection Sunday, Carolina will earn a number 1 seed for the second straight year. Let's now transition to our bold predictions. We each laid out 3 bold predictions for the upcoming season. I'll go first because I think mine might be maybe the most bold one out of the group. I took the challenge to heart and really put together what I think is the boldest prediction between the two of us. I think Carolina goes undefeated in the non-conference season. So I'm basically telling you what I think will happen when they go to Allen Fieldhouse the second night of the year, what's going to happen in Maui and against Alabama in the ACC SEC Challenge. There's a different vibe to this team in the preseason. And maybe it's different because we got to see them play a road game at Memphis in a charity exhibition. But Carolina won that game without their best player. And Memphis has tournament talent. I don't know if they're going to make the tournament because there's always something going on at Memphis, but they've got tournament talent. And they went on the road and beat them without R.J. Davis. You saw the way they competed against Johnson C. Smith. Yes, an overmatched opponent, but once Carolina put the hammer down, they scored 127 points in 40 minutes. I don't care who you're playing against at the college level. That's pretty insane. I think this team is motivated. I think they're fueled by the shortcomings of last year. I think they won't be fazed by a Fog Allen Fieldhouse environment. They play in Cameron every year. Carolina traditionally plays well in Maui. And then that home game against Alabama might be, as you mentioned, the second best environment in the Smith Center all season long. I think Carolina, even though it's the toughest non-con schedule you're going to see from a power conference school this year, I think they walk the dog and get undefeated in non-conference play.
Dude, yeah, at that rate, they're probably getting the number 1 overall seed in the tournament because it's going to take, like I said, I think 2 losses probably is what you would have to win the ACC regular season title. And so at that rate, I mean, there's no question. They're probably looked at as the best team in the country coming into the NCAA tournament. My first one is centered around RJ Davis. I think he breaks the all-time ACC scoring record, as I said earlier, and I think he does it in the regular season. I don't think he even needs the postseason, which is really saying something. I do think that he's a guy that's going to take yet another step scoring-wise, mainly because I think he's just going to be more efficient. I think that he is definitely that's something he's been working on, because what was the biggest issue for him in the game against Alabama? It was that he was not efficient enough. He had one of his worst shooting nights of the entire season in that game. So I think he's motivated to become a more efficient player. I think he's still going to take around the same amount of shots. And if I think he's going to be more efficient, then that means that he's going to score more points. I think that there is a chance that he won't leave it in the dust, but I do think that there is a chance that he breaks it. I'm really hoping it's on that senior night. That would be amazing. And then he's just able to build on it once they get into the ACC and NCAA tournaments.
All right, we'll move on to my second bold prediction. I already told you that I think Carolina repeats as ACC regular season champs. I think Carolina does this year what they had a chance to do last year and didn't do. I think they sweep the ACC regular season, and I think they sweep the ACC tournament title. We saw how much it meant to Carolina last year. Like, they try to win it every year, but like last year, Carolina's message from RJ, from Armando, from Harrison Ingram was, we're here and we're here to win it. It didn't happen. And you could remember it wasn't even just pure disappointment. It was the frustration on their faces when it didn't happen. And part of it, I think because they lost to NC State and allowed the Wolfpack to complete that miracle run to the tournament. But it was also because, by grannies, they wanted to win it for themselves. And it didn't happen. RJ's back. This is his last chance to be able to get it done. I mentioned that I do think Hubert values it a little bit more than Roy Williams does. And so not that it's more validation, because I think what you do over 3 months is more important than what you do over 5 days in a tournament setting. But I do think Carolina sweeps the ACC regular season and the ACC tournament for the first time in quite some time. I think the Heels send a message to the ACC this year, sweeping the ACC regular season and the tournament.
Yeah, definitely not crazy with how deep they are. My second bold prediction, I think Seth Trimble is poised to make a huge leap this year, and we've seen it. Offensively, he looks like he's taken his game to another level. The speed that Carolina is going to want to play with, his athleticism just feeds so well into that. And with the way that he plays defensively, he's one of the best already in the conference, if not the best, going into this season. When you pile all that together, I think that ends up landing him on the first team All-ACC team at the end of the year, which would be an amazing accomplishment. To go from a guy that was in the transfer portal because you were questioning whether or not Carolina had a spot to play you this year, to being a guy that is a first-team All-ACC member, especially because both of your other backcourt mates are going to have outstanding cases themselves. I think that's really going to speak to how special of a season we could see from Seth Trimble. I really believe that he is already this team's second-best scorer. And if he's able to shoot the ball the way that he shot it in the exhibition against Memphis, really just across the board in this preseason, then I think that you're going to have a guy that is going to make this one of the toughest teams to defend in the entire conference. It might be bold with all the other, with the guys that Duke has. There's plenty of talent throughout the rest of the conference, especially at places like Wake Forest. I think Seth Trimble earns first-team All-ACC honors at the end of the year.
My last bold prediction revolves around Carolina's best player, and that's RJ Davis, who we've already said, I believe, sets the scoring mark I think RJ repeats as ACC Player of the Year, the first player to have done that since J.J. Redick in the early 2000s. I think he becomes Carolina's first Naismith National Player of the Year winner since Tyler Hansbrough in the mid-2000s. And I think it all culminates in a return trip to the Final Four. I think RJ is going to build off of what he did last year to where I think the conversation we'll have during the season and at the end of the year is that he puts together the best guard season in the history of the program. I think he gets rewarded as such with more hardware, ACC Player of the Year, National Player of the Year, All-American according to every site, and more importantly, returning to the Final Four for a second time in his Tar Heel career.
Yeah, my final bold prediction is, maybe not the boldest of this group. I think that's probably the Seth Trimble one, but I wanted to save my prediction for the season until the end of the year as well. As I said, I think the Tar Heels win the ACC regular season. I think they get their second straight 1 seed, and I think they advance to the Final Four. I think that this is a team that is hungry to get back there. That's really, I think, the biggest goal. Like, yes, you want to get to the national championship game. That is just a goal that's kind of built in when you're at Carolina, really to get to that final weekend. And if you get there, give yourself a chance to play for the national title game. But getting to 2 Final Fours for RJ Davis, along with breaking the all-time ACC scoring record, would just cement one of the greatest legacies in the history of Carolina basketball. And, it was mentioned earlier today by Joe Barry. At that point, I don't see how you don't end up retiring that number. Like, to me, no one will ever wear 4 ever again if that actually happens. I think it is going to happen because I think that with the depth that this team has, with the versatility, the speed that they're able to play with up and down the floor, that can get you to a Final Four, especially when you got the type of talent that Carolina has. Yes, there are some things that have me, concerned on the defensive end of the floor, but we saw last year that when you get to the NCAA tournament, you can either turn it on or, you're a team that is kind of like Kentucky and gets beat by a really great shooting team. I think that with how good of a coach you've got in Hubert Davis. And this is the thing. Hubert is a guy that a lot of people right now probably don't look at as a great recruiter. I think he's about as good as anybody, if not the best in the sport right now at developing talent. To me, that means more, especially when it comes to in-game coaching. I think he's a better in-game coach than a lot of the guys, probably in my mind, the best in the ACC and amongst the top in all of college football or college basketball, period. I think that is what pays dividends in the end. And Carolina advances to Hubert's second Final Four as well as RJ Davis's second Final Four.
Well, there you go, guys. That's our preview for the upcoming 2024-2025 college basketball season, which gets officially underway on Monday night when UNC hosts Elon at 9 p.m. to get the season underway. With that, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Before we let you go, we do encourage you guys to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com for the latest and the best coverage for Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. The Heels back in action this weekend in Tallahassee, looking to get one step closer to a bowl game. We'll have you covered with the game preview. The injury report for this week is already up on the website. And then, of course, after the game, we'll have you covered with the recap. And then for basketball, we'll be getting you ready with the Elon game over the weekend as well. We really encourage you guys every single day, morning and night, visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com for your latest Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. We're back live now that we're in regular season mode. We'll be live on the weekends recapping games. And then depending on big-time games, during the non-con and the regular season, we'll be live as well. But you know where to find us on the podcasting platforms. Just simply search the Four Corners Podcast. We will pop up, and there we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. The feed is busy and it's active. Today alone, podcast interviews from Debbie Antonelli and Joel Berry have dropped. On Friday, you'll get an interview from Michael Norwood, who shared great stories about his best friend who passed away earlier this offseason, and Joe Wolf. Brennan Marks will also be by as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any game preview, any game recap, any great interview that we do. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on our coverage during the basketball season. So with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.